internationally in 2019. I'm also delighted to be joined by George Kiroyants, who is one of our fourth-year international management students. George has done many things. He was just telling me that he's been advising the Ukrainian government, but he also worked in Harriet's office in Singapore as an intern. So after Harriet has spoken and I've had a chance to ask Harriet some questions, we'll hear from George as well. Really interesting experience. Just one final introductory point. Maybe you could use the Q&A box for your questions, and we will come to those later in the talk. George and I will curate those later on in the session. If we don't get to any of your questions, we will come back to you in one way or another. We'll gather them all up, and Harriet, George and I and my colleagues will come back to you. So really looking forward to this session. Without further ado, let me hand on to Harriet. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that introduction. And for all of you, hundreds and hundreds of you, which is very exciting. And I would like to achieve two things in our time together. The first is to plant a few seeds with you all that I hope we can germinate as you go into day 2 of your academic year and beyond. And secondly, as Professor Bach says, that really get some dialogue. What's on your mind? What are some of the issues? In a sense, I'm a resource for you, an enrichment resource, I hope, and we will follow up on all of the questions, even if we can't answer them today. So let's start. From my perspective, and I know that all of you know this, we are in quite challenging times. A huge vortex of change, whether that's climate change, a health pandemic, the technology and digital disruption on an unprecedented scale. Some would say a crisis of real inclusion and diversity, where not everyone is respected fully because of their age, sex, color, creed, sexuality, and physical and cognitive ability. So these are very challenging times. And I would first like to address, how do I see these challenges impacting you? And then what are some of the amazing upsides and possibilities for you to connect and take advantage of these times? I think, firstly, the attitude and approach that everything starts with you. You power you. You define you. So how you are, what you exude, what we eat, how we exercise, being physically well, and also mentally, how we build confidence and resilience, I think is something that, as we did some testing of what was on your minds, came up. Last Friday, I posted, I'm very active on social media. I posted on LinkedIn, on Twitter and Instagram about the neuroscience behind the David Rock's SCARF model. The SCARF model is really about status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And I just wanted to say a few words about each around you and how each of you deal with these challenging times that we're in. Firstly, status. I think this is an amazing opportunity. Your status is as learners, as students, and being at King's, this opportunity to connect people to possibilities. I will expand upon why I think this is an amazing time for you. Certainty. Now, obviously, none of us have much certainty. I can't guarantee certainty. But one of the ways that I look at this, and if you read my post, is there are things we can't control right now. We can, control ourselves to a degree, and we can focus on the things we can control: our attitude, our responses, our general approach. Autonomy. Well, I think this is an amazing time. Your curriculum, which being on the advisory board, I've had a chance to give input to, and I think is one of the most advanced hybrid digital and physical opportunities. And the autonomy for you to make decisions as the world is your oyster is very, very real. Relatedness. This is how I think we look out for one another. This is highly relevant at this time as we take care of ourselves, but we take care of each other. We show kindness and respect and be totally inclusive. And then the final piece of the SCARF model is around fairness. And I know that I'm totally biased about King's and about your dean, but fairness is something at the very core of King's and at the business school. And so things that don't land well for you, there are many resources to help get them back on track, because fairness is at the core of the culture of the organization with trust. So think about that SCARF model and your mental state of being and how you can affect those things which you can't entirely control. Now, if some of you read my bio, you would know that I am by primary degree a historian. And my second major takeaway for you is that, yes, these are immensely challenging times, but they also provide unprecedented opportunity. I would trade places with any one of you in a heartbeat, because if you look at the historical context, if you have an open and growth mindset, which as students and learners you should have, by innovating and learning, you can capitalize on this vortex of change. In 1957, after a global pandemic, Sony came up with and launched their transistor radio, which was a complete game changer for the industry and indeed for Sony. Microsoft, one of the most valuable companies in the whole world, was formed in the peak of the downturn in 1975. And the Apple iPod came directly after the dot-com crash in 2001, which pulled billions out of tech and out of Silicon Valley. I share these because it is an opportunity. Wherever there is challenge and a vortex of change, there is opportunity for those like you in this extraordinary position that you're in. So you may then say, okay, Harry, that's kind of interesting, but how do I be a part of these unprecedented opportunities? What do I need to do, in your opinion? So first of all, I think you really need to acquire, which is a good thing because you're in the right place to do it, the skills that the world needs and the skills that King's and the business school offers. First of all, very importantly, life skills. I get very agitated when people call these soft skills. It offends my gender enormously. So life skills, and I would pick the following that you get, use this time in a seat of learning to practice them digitally or in person. Collaboration, creativity, being able to persuade others to your viewpoint in a constructive and meaningful way. Adaptability. You are absolutely the generation who are going to demonstrate that being agile and adaptable is core to this growth and this learning mindset. And I would pick the one most important is EQ, to be kind to those around you, to have empathy as you understand how your new ecosystem, your new student living and acting, whether digitally or in person, comes to be. The goal here with these life skills is to get your mindset that you want to learn it all. A fixed mindset is I already know it all. That's not you at all. The second batch of skills that I think are hugely important are technology skills. To find and lead work in the real world, it is all about data, understanding the importance of data, how to organize data, analyze data, reason from that data. And so the sorts of skills and the things that you'll have opportunity to ask more about and learn about are the organization of that data in the cloud, how you reason analytically. You know, AI is a very huge part of the future world that you will enter. And those that can harness the power of AI, machine learning and natural language, those who can help process these capabilities will help organizations be even more relevant. Those of you with design and tech skills, UX, business analysts, the world still needs great sellers, great marketeers, amazingly important video production skills, and how to make social media work for you. So these are very much the skills that the world needs. And if you combine those life skills and tech skills with this positive growth mindset, connecting yourself, connecting those around you to the possibilities of the world, this will be an amazing experience. And then a few things that I would throw in that I have learned, often the hard way, that may be helpful to you if you're feeling a little anxious as you embark, you know, on day one for some of you and returning to this academic year for others. As I've said, none of us can control what is happening in all parts of the vortex right now, but you can control your attitude and your responses. You can control how hard you work and how deeply you prepare yourself to have these skills, to have a Sony transistor radio moment when you graduate. I would encourage you to find connections, to network as much as possible. Find yourself a couple of mentors, people who are wise and trusted advisors. And as is the mantra of Kings, connect to every single possibility. George is going to talk a little bit about this later as the king of connecting to possibilities. Something I've really valued in my life, I've done it since a little girl, is to volunteer. Put up your hand and be bold. Say, I'd like to do this. I'll take this on, Professor Bach. Oh, I'd like to have a go at this. Be agile and get exposure to as many things as you can. And then there are a couple of amazing quotes that I really have taken with me throughout my career. The first one is from Mark Twain, and I believe this wholeheartedly. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the things that you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, and catch the trade winds in your sails. Dream and discover. And whether in person or digitally, you have this amazing opportunity to do this. Secondly, is a wonderful quote from Thomas J. Watson Sr., one of the founders of IBM. And I really think this is in keeping with the spirit and the culture of King's as well. Follow the path of the unsafe, the independent thinker. Expose your ideas to the danger of controversy. Speak your mind and fear less the label of crackpot than the stigma of conformity. Doing it constructively, doing it with empathy, doing it with trust, that is such a wonderful quote. And then perhaps the one that every single day of my life I think about is from which is bizarre because I've never even played ice hockey, is from Wayne Gretzky, the ice hockey coach. 100% of the shots that you do not take most definitely will not go in. So I guess my message is, you are our future. Mine's, Professor Bach's, the world's. You're in a great center of learning, an organization that has crafted most thoughtfully and adapted most quickly to this vortex of change. I'm biased. I think King's is one of the best universities on one of the newest business programs in the world. And your job is quite simple. Your job is to acquire the skills that the world needs. And then the world is absolutely your oyster. I can't be and you can't be. Nobody can be exactly sure what type of world it will be, but it's yours to help lead and shape. And my biggest, most important theme to you is really from the mighty Nelson Mandela. And this is really to you. It's about the power of you. Every day, think about your own power. Be the change that you want to see in the world. It's not someone else's job to do this. We can help, we can support, and that's why you're at this amazing institution at this time. But it's for you to be the change that you want to see in the world. So with that, I will hand back to Professor Bach, who always manages to grill me and ask me questions that I really wish he hadn't. And hopefully that will be informative for all of you. Stephen. Stephen, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was. We never have a session when we don't do that. Thank you very much for that, inspiring talk. I think, in these, as you said, strange times, really providing that sort of uplifting opportunity. And as you say, it starts with you and all the people in the room today on day one of term. I mean, there's a lot in your talk. I just wanted to start with, maybe one of your big themes around skills and attributes and the SCARF model and an emphasis on kindness and respect and fairness. I just wonder if, as you look at your career as well and the organizations you've worked at, I mean, is this just a moment where we're all sort of into stakeholders and we're all being sort of cuddly to each other? Or is this a sort of more of a permanent change? I mean, I suppose in a way I'm asking, are we all going to go back and be Gordon Geckos and this is just a moment? And in 5 years' time, we'll think actually those, I won't use the words, those sort of interpersonal skills, will be less valued, and some of those empathy, kindness, or respect, or are they timeless?
Well, my own view, Stephen, as you know, is that some of the great organizations that have proven sustainability, whether they're institutions of learning, whether they're great corporations, have people at the very, very core. The first time I was made a public company CEO, our work and strategy was around people, planet, and profits, in that order. So I think those organizations that are most sustainable, those startups that go from teenage startups to being, you know, great organizations have people at the core. I also think myself as a leader, you know, I had my first sort of managing director role at 29 of the macro group. And I profoundly believe, and it's a Maya Angelou, a poet who I adore, it's one of her lines, and it could not be more true. I honestly don't think people remember anything about what you tell them, about what you exactly do, but they do remember how you make them feel. So kindness and empathy, it doesn't mean you can't have edge and power forward and be innovative and a growth mindset. It's just making people feel like you would like to feel yourself. And I think for me, that is enduring. And at university, when you either come or you return, you have a wonderful chance to reinvent yourself, you know, whether that's just digitally or, you know, in your tutorials. And I think putting people first is central, and especially at this time because of the vortex of change that I described, Stephen.
Right. And I mean, just pick up another one on the same theme. I mean, you also talked about resisting what I took to mean groupthink. And, you know, we all work in big organizations where it's very easy, you know, you listen to the most sort of powerful person in the room, the person with the highest status. How do you know, I mean, maybe you got some examples as well. I mean, how do you, you know, and also, you know, as a woman and someone at 29, I mean, how did you both sort of exhibit, you know, get your presence in the room and also, in a sense, battle against any kind of groupthink, you know?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, I think being constructive, being, you know, delightful, it is easier to make change happen and take people with you if they want to. I mean, some of the amazing quotes about our great loss in a Supreme Court judge last week sort of talked about that. So I think we have to all learn, regardless of gender, to take people with us in the most constructive way. But I also think, and I was not very good at that in the early stages. I was much more aggressive, much less of an emollient than perhaps I am now. But I think it's very important. And, you know, my father, my mother gave me this sense that my opinion mattered. And I think it's very important to create in universities, in businesses, environments where together you brainstorm in an agile way, where title is unimportant, that you are creating new ways of doing things that solve a particular problem in a fast, iterative way. I also believe, and I've written on this a lot, listening skills are very, very important. You know, everyone likes to talk and be heard, but really listening to what someone else is talking about very carefully, showing that you're listening digitally and online, and really thinking about those inputs as it may change the course of what you had in your head. So I think listening skills are very important. And then specifically on the gender issue, I mean, having already said I was a little bit more aggressive than I am now and had no issue with stating my opinions, I think it is important. And I think some of our younger generations, our youngest, for example, we talk about this a lot with her, is, you know, only you should define you. I think particularly for women, not being so worried about what everyone else thinks and being liked, which is something that, you know, social media has helped stitch us together in some of those ways. But, you know, as long as you are constructive, as long as you are clearly and kindly and respectfully giving your input, you have a right to do that and really should. As Thomas Watson, who was at the time the founder of a company that went on, 109 years. And King's, with its huge legacy, has a history of doing that, doesn't it, Stephen?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think, it seems to me that, when I think about how my sort of leadership style has evolved, I mean, I think people want transparency and they want clarity, and they really want to know what you're thinking. I think sometimes, when I started in this job, sometimes I was very much listening to what everyone said, but then didn't always, as much as perhaps I should have done, said, okay, and we're going to do A, B, and C. And I think that comes, partly with confidence and reflection. But I think people, they want to be heard, but they also do want the person who they think, or the people, to make the decision. But I think so many, as I think about the last 6 months and how we've navigated the last 6 months, so much of it has been about listening to our students who've helped us, co-produce and work with us on innovations. And I think that's absolutely vital. I mean, how do you think communication is changing in this kind of, like what we're doing now with Zoom? I mean, it's interesting, the debate that people are having about the return to the office, with very polarized. I mean, some organizations, some of the tech organizations saying no need, but a lot of CEOs and others I talk to are very, very keen to get their people back.
Yeah. So I think in this vortex of change, I pick up on a couple of things. First of all, and I would say this of you, you are deeply authentic. There's no bullshit. You're not trying to be something you're not, and that transcends through the business school. And then, as you say, being clear, and all of those elements are captured, I think, within the programs that will be delivered during the course of the year. I mean, I think it is very important online that those skills I talked about are practiced even more, demonstrating that you're listening, being sensitive to an exchange, a face, a look, a worry. Trying to engage people online, I have learned, is a entirely new skill set. And I know that with your sort of code of conduct, the way that the courses have been constructed digitally, that you've given a great deal of attention to that. But I also think it's important for the students to give feedback, to share what's working and what isn't working. My own view is that people want choice based on individual circumstances. Some wish to be entirely digital, some wish to be partly digital and be in person in London, and increasingly, I feel particularly our young want greater choice, and how that choice is managed with employers and with governments and with universities is still needs refining and with work. But generally, communication in this digital age, you hit the nail on the head. It's authenticity, it's clarity, and that boldness, as well as the listening skills, need to come through.
I just want to pivot a little bit, because obviously with your experience of IBM Asia Pacific, I mean, you mentioned data and the importance of data, and of course, there are so many strands in this, but there are a number that are very, very positive, but also some that are concerning. So obviously we have the criticism of the big tech companies around security, data management, ethics, of algorithms. And then of course we have the kind of geopolitical context with, we have a presidential election coming, and, slightly worrying developments between, China and the US in some of these spheres, and of course the UK involved. So maybe you could just reflect a little bit on, how you see this sort of panning out. I mean, I suppose, are the tech companies more, to use King Lear, are they more sinned against than sinning?
Well, I think, there are clearly those companies that have been forces for good in the world, tech companies and others, and those who are not. But I think three things are very critical in the data, this explosion of data and how we manage it. The first is for each of us to take our own responsibility. Do we know what data there is about us? Entire business models that are predicated on selling our data to make their billions. So understanding the context of how our own data is used and taking responsibility for that is key. I think secondly, as I said in my talk, the best way to equip yourself to play a part for good in the world going forward is to understand data, understand how it is produced, understand how it is organized, understand how it is analyzed, understand how the ethics and the security of that data is so fundamental to some companies and not to others. So there's an AI summit happening real time at the moment that I pre-recorded about AI and teens, getting young people to really understand the data, cloud, AI, blockchain, and these technologies as a way to play a part in the future. And then thirdly, that we have to make sure, not just at King's in the business school, but again, putting up your hand, volunteering, supporting those programs that try and ensure that this is not just the data for some and not for all. Tech, for some and not for all. With all of the issues that I talked about at the start, climate change, the pandemic, technology and digital disruption, but also inclusion and diversity at the very core, so that we do not have inculcated greater unconscious bias by coders coding as they are and increasing the bad tech issues. But my underlying advice here is get comfortable with these issues, understand these issues. And if you want more data on these issues, the world again through King's is your oyster to connect upon it. But the best way to manage some of these fears is to learn more about it so that you have a viewpoint, and if you choose to, play a greater part. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I'm just going to ask you one quick question, and then I want to bring in George. So, a personal question. I mean, I went through many of the roles that you've had to date. What do you think is your proudest moment? That you would share.
So I think it would be when I was announced as in my first public company CEO role of Premier Farnell in 2006. Very few women, still sadly, very few women as the CEOs. I think there are more men called Mike or Brian as CEOs than there are the entire female population. So a public company, a sensational chairman that I could now really start to move and shape that organization with shareholders who bought the stock, with a board that could help direct things. And I had, huge butterflies, but I just felt, I'd set myself the challenge to be a public company CEO by the time that I was 40. I was a little bit older, but I felt that I was beginning to make progress.
The importance of setting clear goals for yourself. I mean, they will change, of course. Setting them, gives you a real kind of roadmap of where you want to go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's bring in George at this point, and then we'll open it up a bit more broadly. George, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Harriet and Stephen, for letting me join this Fire Talk. I'd like to share my experience at IBM Asia Pacific and how King's led me to achieving that opportunity, and how connections lead to new opportunities, how important it is for our time in university to make good connections. So during my third year at King's College, my degree was international management. I was given the opportunity to do my internship in IBM Asia Pacific, located in Singapore, thanks to King's Business School and Harriet. So I think in regards with my degree, it was probably the best opportunity any student could ask for, because first of all, it was something that was very international. It was a company, it was IBM. It has a global presence, and being in Singapore as well, like one of the main financial hubs in Asia, was something that I could really relate to my studies at King's, since I was doing everything with international management. So having Harriet as my mentor was really something amazing. I learned a lot while I was there. I gained a lot of knowledge on AI and all the future skills that make you future ready. As Harriet was talking about how we are going through the age of transformation, and our generation needs to be really well equipped for that. Yes, and also I'd like to share how good connections from King's led me to IBM, and how from IBM I gained a job working for the Ukrainian government as well. So I was advising the government on AI legislation, and on how to correctly make laws for the future education of the Ukrainian population. That was all thanks to something that I gained from King's. So I never thought in my life that I would be halfway across the world, first in Singapore doing work experience, then I would be working for the cabinet of ministers in Ukraine, teaching them about AI. So things really come unexpectedly, and you always have to learn and always prepare for the future. And so I would say that that's the most important thing right now, is to have good connections and to be ready for the future. Yeah. Thank you. We're glad to answer any questions that would be in the Q&A.
I mean, I know it's always hard to look back after you've done something, but what do you think was, the most challenging and surprising thing when you were working, at IBM? I mean, what, were there things you thought, oh, that's really different from what I expected, or, how just reflect on that a little bit.
Well, I think probably the most challenging part for me would be being at IBM in Singapore. It's very far away from London. The culture, the nationality culture, the business culture was completely different. So being adjusted to a completely different environment and working in such a fast-paced organization, and especially in the CEO's office where everything could change in a second. So I think just really to adjust to the fast-paced environment and to the new culture in Asia specifically, that was something that was probably the most difficult for me.
Right, really interesting. Maybe we should open it up a little bit now. I can see lots and lots of questions coming in. I mean, I see that the first theme that at the top of the list is very much about networking, and I think people asking Harriet, in sort of more, how do you actually go about that? I mean, you're saying it's really important. How do you actually do it, and how do you do it well?
You guys have got such an amazing advantage. When it took me years to work out that networking was important. When I was first a businesswoman, because there were no objectives linked to it, I just thought it was a waste of time. But now, through channels, whether it's LinkedIn, creating your own communities and network at King's, the array of resources and people to help, it's about reaching out now digitally to the vast array of communities that exist, whether it's Data 101, whether it's, mentors that King's provide. It's really about putting yourself about. Even more important, because we're not all together in one place as we might have been before, that you do that digitally, that you reach out, that you connect, that you ask, that you position, that, if you don't get responses to start with, I always used to say you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find either a prince or a princess. And so, you know, this is a good way to build knowledge and connections. And the core mantra at King's is helping you to connect to those possibilities. So you now have capabilities through digital media, through social media to start that. And if you are in London, through the array of student bodies, teaching bodies at King's and the wider university, the opportunity is endless to work. Decide what it is you want to network around, and then pick the people.
And I think that probably, yeah, I mean, in the business school, we're providing a lot of opportunities through our alumni, through our mentoring programs. So, you know, there are opportunities there. And of course, you know, use the King's Business School Careers Service as well. So yeah, those really important insight. I've got a real interview question here, Harriet.
Oh no.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced during your career? How did you approach it, and what did you learn from the experience? And I think it perhaps connects a little bit, although sort of, to a question about, you know, almost, I think, paraphrasing, you know, your biggest mistake and what you learned. I mean, some of the same terrain.
Absolutely. Well, I would say up front, I've made a number of you know, mistakes. You have to, you know, and you pick yourself up, you dust yourself down, and that's what resilience is all about. But a really big learning for me, in fact, it's one and then it leads to another. I'm being very open with you all, but my time as CEO at Thomas Cook, we did an amazing array of great transformational work to move the business from a traditional travel environment to online, mobile, different content strategies, rebranding, every single major metric, from the number of clients, the age of the clients, the business, etc., dramatically improved. And I am extraordinarily proud of that work. However, one of my big learnings as a CEO was that I perhaps could have done a much better job taking the board. So the board is, you know, the sort of advisory or supervisory body, the shareholders' representatives, that this was not fully done in the sort of 3 years that I 24/7 drove at it, that it needed to be embedded and it needed to be, you know, really made solid and sustainable over a 5 or 6 year period. And I did not take the board with me as I have, you know, subsequently learned to do. And I would say then the huge next learning on that was, whilst I was doing that business transformation, that digital transformation, I realized that as a public company CEO, I didn't really have the skills that I needed around all the things I'm saying to you, around data, around security, around cloud, around AI, that I was having to rely on a CTO or a CIO who probably didn't know that much more than I did, but was the person who should have done. So in a sense, being able to go and do a startup for IBM, the cognitive, the Watson IoT business, my contribution, I think, to IBM was that I could help drive transformation and change. And IBM taught me a huge amount about the technology and the skills and the capabilities that the world needs, because all roles in the world are changing, whether it's at a university, as a student, because of the digital solutions to the world's problems that I described.
Yeah, I think that's, well, thank you for sharing that way. I mean, to me, I think, you know, whenever I think about a difficult decision or something, it's always about the why. That's, if you can't answer the why question, you've got nothing. If you can't convince your colleagues or stakeholders, you know, why you're doing this, why it's important, then all the other stuff about the way in which you're going to do it is all irrelevant.
Well, in a sense, what I was describing there, Stephen, was with the why, and it was working, but I didn't explain it to your point exactly. And that, you know, I made it look easier than it was. Big learning for me. Not that you should make things look harder, but, you know, typical female, oh, yep, we can do this. And we were doing it. The metrics were amazing. But you need, as you rightly say, to take everyone with you clearly on the way, understanding in full.
And sometimes you can't take everyone with you. And then, you know, they need to make a choice. Are they on the bus or are they going to get off the bus? I mean, that sounds a little bit macho, but because I think, you know, also having sort of negative people around you is very, very toxic. I mean, I've always been lucky not to, but I think when you see people, you know, that can be very difficult when you have people who aren't sort of really on board with the project where you're trying to get to.
And that also goes for the students, you know, surround yourself by people who lift you, who are fabulous to be around, who are learners, you know, and you get the choice, you know, the choice is yours. You surround your people, surround yourself, whether it's digitally and networked or whether it's physically, with those that you just think, wow, I want to do this and be this, or people who, we were at a session with Rosabeth Cantor last week, you know, who just whine, you know, so choose great people. You're at a great school and make sure you make the right connections to reach these possibilities.
Right. I'm going to ask one more and then I'm going to ask George maybe to curate one or two questions. I mean, I've got one here. On the issue of equal rights, although there's been a great improvement, there are still limitations in the current environment for women to start their careers. What do you think is the biggest obstacle for women to succeed in their careers?
So I think I'll address that at a kind of platform or fundamental level. And I do think that some things have been made more challenging in this vortex of change. So I think regardless of gender, we all have to decide what choices we want to make. Everyone makes choices, and you have the right to make those choices and make them work for you. They should be your choices. And I think that, you know, in the period of time that I've been working, certainly our youngest, Gemma, says that in the workplace, things have become significantly easier for people to work, to be involved in their family, to make those choices work for them. But I think that as we go through this very difficult vortex of change, I think it's very important that women and men reassess those choices together. What is best for the individual, for the family unit, for the partnership, for the couple, you know, that no one feels that they are being held back or, you know, the burden of change with home working is affecting one of the key family members more than the other. So I think this reassessment of choices amongst those units is unbelievably important. Otherwise, bitterness, suffering, and dis-ease will affect all of our performance. I think it's very important to work, you know, as you think about getting roles with these skills the world needs in companies that prove if you are good, you will get on because of your age, your sex, your color, your creed, your sexuality, and your physical and cognitive ability. It's an employer's job to prove to you that if you can see it, you can be it. And look out for those and find mentors and role models that can help make those connections with you and for you. And King's has many. It has a history of incredibly powerful, capable women and men driving the school sustainably forward. You're in a petri dish of marvelous capabilities there.
Thank you. George, do you want to, maybe select something?
Yep. I have an interesting question for Harriet here. And it says, can you walk us through some highlights of your journey from being a medieval history major to being a world leader of technology? In retrospect, are there any learnings you wish you knew about when you were starting off your career path?
Yeah, I won't bore you all with my journey, but thank you for the interesting question. But there are some things that I've already shared that I wish I'd known. I mean, I was a lot angrier and I would say quite a hardcore feminist when I came to university. And had I realized, as I learned a little bit later in life, that getting everyone to support you in your ideas and in your approach, it might have been easier on absolutely everyone. I think that I've had very clear goals, and that has helped me, as Professor Bach said. But it doesn't matter if you miss your goal by a couple of years. You can be adaptable and agile. I would say the single most important thing that I have been blessed with, and I would encourage us all to build on this, is that you are the power within you. So look after yourself, look after your teeth, your feet, your body, your mind, because resilience, that sort of amazing combination of grit and grace, is what will keep you moving forward, to see the opportunities in this very challenging time, to, push forward when others say, oh, no, I'm not going to go and do learning. I'm just going to sit under my bed and cry because the world isn't very nice. So being resilient, bring that combinational force of grit and grace, and investing in you. You are the power within you. And as Nelson Mandela said, I want all of you to be the change that you want to see in the world. And we're all here to help you.
Thank you. There's one here about if you were still, CEO of Thomas Cook, what would you prioritize during this crisis, or I guess in charge of any big organization?
So I think in charge of any big organization, the health and well-being of our employees is fundamental. That's mental health, physical health. I was talking last week to the employee of a very well-known mobile phone company. And this young woman is no longer in a call center. She's in the middle of a very remote part of India on a very shaky line being shouted at by customers. And that's not right. And so how we as employers ensure that the tools and the capabilities to help get physically and mentally through this time, and then be able, using agile methods of iteration, working great digital solutions for our clients. Every client, I've seen lots of cartoons, I'm sure you have too. Who has moved forward digital transformation the most in the last 3 years? Is it your CIO? Is it your CEO? Is it your CTO? Or is it C19? And so back to my point, that as challenging as this time is, the opportunities for you are very real. Go use them.
Thank you. There's one about work-life balance. I mean, my feeling about that is, and obviously the pressures of the kind of 24/7 society, and we're all working at home, and we haven't got an excuse saying, oh, we're down the pub or somewhere like that, or maybe a little bit, but not for too much longer. So I mean, it seems to me that that's probably something that you know is balanced over a career rather than in any particular moment in any particular job. I think that's how I tend to think about it. I mean, you may have a view on that. And just slightly field left because we're running out of time. You know, on a more substantive issue, someone's asking about climate change and how you think this will really impact on business. It was a theme that you touched on quite early on in your talk.
Yes, indeed. So I think on balance, I agree that working with companies and with organizations that support you through a lifetime of change is very important. But I would go back to two elements I've raised. I think that the choices that you want to make to pursue the goals and the type of life and work you want to have, which can be reiterated, can address balance in different ways. And I also think that taking care of you, you know, I'm not necessarily the most balanced individual that you've ever met, but I've been very clear about the choices I wanted to make, about the goals that I had, and they have evolved and adapted through various phases of my career. So I think you have to take the long view, but make some good steps using this amazing opportunity at King's you have. The whole climate change issue probably shouldn't be, you know, squashed into the final minute, but I do think for all of you, the issue of sustainability of this planet, particularly around oceans, about the way we think very differently, that is a great way for you to look at some of your projects, look at some of the connected work through networks and mentors. It will be fundamental to you all as our future and us on the planet.
Thank you. I think we should bring it to a close. We've got lots of questions. They're flooding in, which I think just shows how stimulating your talk was. And George, there's quite a few for you as well, George. But we will respond to those over the coming days as well. Get back to you on that. I think this has been a fantastic session. Thank you very much, Harriet, for being with us. I think really illustrating, you know, of course the challenges, but the opportunities we face, the opportunity of this year that those on the call have at King's, and the resources available to them, and that this is an exciting moment. I mean, as organizations try and navigate the next normal and what that is, I mean, as George did in Ukraine with AI, I think all of you can do in terms of you know, preparing yourself and contributing to the future. So thank you very much to Harriet, to George, to all of you on the call. And I look forward to seeing you all again at the next Connections talk. And thank you very much finally again to Harriet for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Professor Bach. Thank you all. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.